let me say it's a great pleasure being here. In Noongar language, I say Kaya Wanju, hello and welcome. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're sitting and pay my respects to the Whadjuk people, their elders, past and present. I also want to thank you, Craig, CEO of Older Persons Advocacy Network, for the stewardship that you demonstrate so often in the work that you do. I also acknowledge Deidre Timms, CEO of Advocare, Dr. Kate Barnett, OAM, researcher and author of the review of the OPAN Elder Abuse Advocacy and Prevention Programs, and the many distinguished guests who are here with us today. I've always admired people who take on advocacy roles. It doesn't matter in which context, because it is through advocacy that we achieve the changes that are necessary to protect those who are vulnerable. It requires both a level of dedication and commitment. It requires compassion and understanding, but it also requires a deep understanding of the needs of the individuals that you advocate for. And it's great to speak to senior advocates who support senior Australians and stand up for their rights. A key element of our reform agenda is ensuring that senior Australians have a voice to speak up for them when they need it most. And some of you would have heard me refer to the fact that there are people in aged care who never receive a visitor for 365 days of the year. That 40% are vulnerable. And that 40% often in circumstances don't have the knowledge and information about some of the people who can help them. And I want to turn to your framework shortly. A fundamental part of this Older Persons Advocacy Network, or OPAN, the provider of our government's National Aged Care Advocacy Program, is important. Since its inception in July last year, OPAN has been busy, particularly in the creation of new training resources and expanding support it provides to senior Australians experiencing abuse. This includes the new Talk to Us First training videos. These internet-based products will help aged care providers educate their workforce and the Charter of Care recipients' rights and the responsibilities in OPAN's advocacy services, so staff members know where to turn if they believe a care recipient needs an independent voice to stand up for their rights. The second exciting development is the new National Elder Abuse Prevention and Support Framework. This was built using results from an evaluation of elder abuse prevention and support programs which have been running in South Australia and Western Australia and is believed to be the first of its kind in the world. On top of the more than 27 million in funding for OPAN services, an additional 3 million has been committed to help OPAN expand its work in elder abuse prevention, early intervention and responsive advocacy. The new initiatives announced today come as the latest figures from OPAN WA services provider Advocare show a considerable rise in calls to the state's elder abuse helpline. Advocare regularly receives around 60 calls a month about elder abuse concerns, but these rose to over 100 in October. There's been a growing trend all year, but the significant increase may be because of the rising awareness, especially with the announcement of the Aged Care Royal Commission and new Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission. The Royal Commission has a broad remit covering all Australians receiving aged care services. And let me say that the Royal Commission is not about a witch hunt. It is about a structural reform that looks after senior Australians in a way that we should seriously consider. When you consider out of 25 million people, 10.1 million are now 55 and over. That's a significant proportion of the population for our nation. That means the cohorts living to 100 will increase substantially. It means that the 5,000 Australians living to over 100 now will increase to 20,000 by 2050 and will continue to rise. So the work of advocacy and the work that OPAN does is going to be critical with that number of people entering the journey of choice and living longer, but more importantly, being in services for which they will need somebody to intervene on their behalf when something goes awry. Clearly, there is enormous interest across the nation with aged care residents, their families and providers, and community groups lodging more than 5,000 submissions just to shape the terms of reference. While the Royal Commission goes about its important work, our rigorous reform program will continue at full pace, and there'll be absolutely no compromise on quality aged care. This includes the creation of the Independent Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission, which is on track to start on the 1st of January 2019 with expanded monitoring of aged care services. The new commission will streamline aged care, oversight and enforce a new single set of quality standards, and it's the first upgrade of the standards in 20 years. And it was great to hear you refer to a particular standard in respect to individuals that are part of your remit. As part of the More Choices for a Longer Life budget package, the government is providing an additional $22 million for a variety of services to tackle elder abuse. Through the Attorney-General's Department, the funding will include the establishment of a trial of specialist elder abuse units in legal services, more support for family counselling and mediation services, and the advancement of health justice partnerships. A national plan to coordinate activities to combat elder abuse is also currently being developed. Stopping the abuse of our elders, be it financial, physical or emotional, is everyone's responsibility, and we owe it to senior Australians. Because we think of the years in which they grew up, they were not as easy as our years. Their hard work, their physical endeavours, their commitment to raising families and earning an income to provide for their families and themselves was based on their dreams and vision to have a life at which they retired that would give them some certainty in the way in which they'd live out their retirement years and then ultimately their ageing years until death. But because of elder abuse, we see interventions by individuals that take away from them that certainty and that sense of that aspiration being eroded. What I like about the National Elder Abuse Prevention and Advocacy Framework is the principles that are on the front page that are the focus of the 5 key things that we need to consider. But more importantly, when you go towards the back of the publication, it has an appendix mapping the collaboration and partnership organisations that are important in the way in which we tackle all of those elements of abuse that are experienced by senior Australians. And let me say that when we do reach out and we do put a hand on somebody's shoulder and say, I'm here, I want to help you through the crisis. I felt really terrible about a couple that came and saw me who had their son talk them into signing over their house in order for him to develop a business proposition. And in all faith, they gave him total ownership of the house with the blessing of a sister. A week later, they went out to their GP. When they came back, all their furniture, all their goods and everything that they had accumulated over a lifetime was on the lawn. When they were reminded that the house no longer belonged to them and they needed to find their own way. That's the extreme element. But I think the other element that's important, and I want to acknowledge OPAN members for this, is that when you go into aged care facilities or into the support arenas to help an individual, the thing that I get feedback on is the fact that you sit and you listen. You listen first before you talk, but you also make physical contact through a handshake, or in some instances comfort them by putting an arm around their shoulder. And those senior Australians who've had the engagement with OPAN have said that has meant the world to them, because for the first time they have someone who is showing that they care and they're prepared to work. So it gives me great pleasure to launch your framework. It is a brilliant document in which everybody can turn to, use it fundamentally as the guideline for how you can make an incredible difference to the lives of vulnerable senior Australians or to Australians who are being put through abuse as an elder. So I congratulate all of those involved. Deirdre and Greg, the work that you have done along with your colleagues on this, I want to acknowledge because it is worthy in the way in which we will reflect on how we treat our seniors as a country. So thank you very much.